dog Rosie had just given birth to 7 puppies. My Rosie is a mischievous dog who sometimes sneaks out of the yard. One particular time she got out and wandered over to the neighbors who had a male dog, and neither of them were fixed, so I wasn't surprised when the vet told me she was pregnant. There was no way I was going to be able to care for Rosie and all 7 puppies, so I decided to sell them. I put ads up on a few different places, and immediately after I got flooded with texts and emails from people interested in the puppies. One by one the pups were reserved until there was just one left. One night around 7 p.m., I got an email message from a man who was interested in the last pup. He asked a lot of questions about the breed and the puppy's health, which was normal. He then asked if he could come by and see the puppy. I told him he could come by tomorrow afternoon. He told me that he lived about an hour and a half away, but was in the area only about 25 minutes away that night. So it would really help him out if he could come now. I told him fine, but not to be too late. He said he would be by in about 30 minutes. 30 minutes go by, and the guy doesn't show. More time goes by, and still nothing. It was beginning to get late, so I figured the guy just flaked. The puppies were sleeping now anyways, so I decided to just shower, then get ready for bed. I was only in the shower for about 2 minutes when I heard a knock at the door. I get out of the shower, throw my robe on, and head to the front door. I look through the peephole to see a strange older man standing there. "Can I help you?" I asked through the door. "Yeah, I'm here to see the puppy." At this point, it's like 9:45 at night. This guy was supposed to be here at 7:30. I told him it was too late and he would have to reschedule a time to see the puppy. He said that he had some car trouble and his phone had died on the way. "I'll just stay for a couple of minutes, I promise," he said. I paused for a second and thought about it, and against my better judgment, I told him, "Okay, just a minute though." I went upstairs and put on some sweats. While I was upstairs dressing, I heard Rosie growling. When I got back downstairs, I saw Rosie standing in front of the door growling and scratching. As I started to open the door, Rosie began barking. I held her by the collar. She was pulling and becoming increasingly aggressive. I'd never seen her behave this way before. She was always a very friendly dog. I calmed her as much as I could. She stopped barking and pulling, but she did continue to growl. I let the man in and motioned him toward the kennel where the pups were sleeping. I started to explain to him about the puppy, its personality, and its eating habits. I noticed this guy was paying less attention to me and more attention to what was outside my windows. He kept peeking out like he was looking for someone, or more like to see if anyone was around. I asked if he wanted to hold the puppy. He said I'd love to. As I bent down to grab the puppy for him, from behind me I heard a click. As I was still bent down, I peeked behind me to see the man was now holding a switchblade. He was slowly creeping up behind me. Out of nowhere, Rosie jumped up and bit down on the man's arm. He screamed out in pain and dropped the blade. He began moving toward the front door, Rosie still hanging onto his arm. I can see the blood around her mouth as he waved from side to side trying to shake her off. After he finally got his arm free, he ran out the front door with Rosie on his heels. I ran up behind Rosie in time enough to get his plate number and the make and model of his car before he sped off. Rosie came back inside and I gave her the biggest hug and thanked her for saving my life. The info I gave the cops about the car helped them a lot. The man was caught a day later. The scary part is the cops told me that this guy had done this a few other times before, and some of these women weren't so lucky. I work evenings Monday through Friday. so I get off around 11, and I don't get home till a little after midnight. Tonight was pretty busy, so I was extremely tired when I got home, but I still had to walk my dog Brute. I grabbed the leash and called to him, and outside we went. We walked outside for a bit, but for some strange reason, Brute wouldn't go. I was pretty annoyed because I was so tired, but I continued to walk for a couple more minutes, but he still wouldn't go. At this point, I just gave up and walked back toward my apartment. We get inside, I take off his leash, lock up, and pass out on the bed. I was too exhausted to even get out of my work clothes. Brute woke me up again about 3 a.m. to be taken back out. Because he didn't go the first time, I expected this. I was groggy and fumbling around in the dark to find the leash. I found it on the ground where I'd apparently dropped it. I took Brute outside and almost immediately he went. I was ready to get back to sleep, so this made me happy. I walked Brute back up the stairs into my apartment, unclipped the leash, and passed back out on the bed. I woke up to the sound of my door slamming shut. I jumped up in my bed. Brute began to growl, standing in the middle of my bedroom floor. I was the only person that had keys to my place, so naturally I was terrified. And even more so when I realized I didn't lock the door when I came back in from walking the dog. My apartment was pitch black. I couldn't see anything except my clock that was reading 4 a.m. Brute began barking at this point. As I got out of my bed and stood near him, he moved in front of me and continued to bark ferociously. Suddenly I heard the floor creaking from the living room. At this point I was terrified. Someone was in my apartment. I stood behind my barking dog and yelled the first thing that came to me. "I have a gun!" Though I didn't. I waited for a response. Nothing. I then heard the floor creak again. The creaks were coming toward my room. I moved back, scared out of my mind. Suddenly, Brute ran out of my bedroom, still barking, and then I heard a man scream. I ran back toward my bed and grabbed my phone and started dialing 911. The screaming continued as I dialed. The operator picked up and I told her there was an intruder in my apartment. And as I started giving her my address, I heard Brute yell. Immediately following, my door slamming shut again. The operator told me to stay on the phone. The police were en route. I called out to Brute. Nothing. I was too afraid to leave my room, so I called out again. Still nothing. I was worried. I got off the bed and moved closer to my bedroom door to take a look, very frightened. And then I was relieved to see that he was okay, though he did have blood around his mouth. I checked him out, looking for any wounds. There were none. The blood wasn't his. The police arrived and took a report. I never actually saw the person, so I couldn't give a description to the police. The officer concluded that the person must have kicked or hit the dog to loosen his grip, then ran out. I'm still very nervous since I live alone, but I try not to live my life in fear. But I now triple check my locks before I go to bed. Every morning at 5 a.m., I go for a run before I get ready for school. I prefer to run in my neighborhood at this time because it's quiet and no cars. There is, however, a cat that greets me at my front door every morning, like clockwork. And this morning was no different. I put on my sweats and shoes, open my front door quietly so I don't wake my parents, and there he is. The same black cat just sitting there almost like he's waiting for me. Personally, I've never liked cats. They always kind of creep me out. So needless to say, I wasn't happy when this one kept showing up. I walked past it like I always did, trying not to acknowledge it, and went to the curb to stretch. Just as I was beginning to stretch my legs, I heard. I turned around to see the cat was sitting directly behind me. I clapped loudly to try to get him to go away, but he didn't flinch, just stared at me. I turned around and finished stretching, then started to run. I ran my normal route, feeling the chilly air hit my face. I loved it. Ever since the very first run I did 2 years ago. For me, it was like a spiritual thing, with me and nature, not just about exercise. At this point, I was running back in the direction of my house. When I got about a block away from my place, I heard a noise behind me. I kept running but glanced back behind me. I didn't see anything. When I turned back forward, I saw something about 15 feet in front of me. When I got closer, I realized it was the black cat. It was right in my path, so I yelled for it to move. It didn't budge. As I maneuvered around the cat, I yelled back, "What's up with you?" This cat had always met me at my front door, but today he was bugging the crap out of me. I was coming up on my house. I sped up a bit and ran until I reached my mailbox, where I stopped to catch my breath. And that's when I heard. Before I could turn, before I could do anything, I felt a hand come over my mouth. I let out a scream, but it was very muffled. I struggled a lot, but whoever this was had a strong grip around me, and I couldn't get away. I was terrified. I couldn't believe this was happening, and right in front of my house. I mean, I could see my bedroom window. I felt myself being dragged away. I kept struggling to get free, but I was helpless. I felt a tear roll down my cheeks as I smelled the awful odor from this person that was violently dragging me from my home. Then I heard a loud sound from behind me. Suddenly the grip around me was released, and I fell to the ground. I looked behind me to see a tall man with the black cat on his face. The cat was clawing and hissing at the man before he threw it to the ground. I was already to my front door by this time. I quickly unlocked the door, ran inside, and shouted for my parents. I took one look outside my window, and the tall man was still there. He was pretty scratched up and bleeding around his eyes. He took one last glance up at me in the window before he ran off down the street. One of our neighbors had seen what happened and had already called the police, who arrived quickly. And thankfully, my neighbor who called the cops recognized the man who attacked me to be the son of another one of our neighbors, an old woman that lived a couple of blocks from us along my running route. The police found the guy at his home. Apparently, he told his mom his scratches were from him being jumped on the way to the store, but once he saw the cops, he told them everything. The scariest part is he told the cops that he had been watching me run from his bedroom window every day for a month before he decided to try and abduct me. The next morning, just as the one before and all the others, the black cat was back, which made me happy because I had been waiting for it, just as it always had been waiting for me. This cat had saved me, and I decided to return the favor. So I adopted him. I named him Angel, and since that morning, he and I have been pretty much inseparable.